It is Monday, January 26th, and this is Irish Illustrated Insider, Wing T backfield formation today. I'm Tim O'Malley, joined by Tim Priester and Drew Bantock of Irish Illustrated, John Bryce of Football Scoop. And guys, news on Sunday was always going to happen. Could have happened last year, could have happened this year, would have happened next year, but it's probably the worst news for Notre Dame fans in terms of the loss of a position coach that I can recall in all of my years watching or covering Notre Dame football. We'll get to that later. But of course, Mike Mickens to accept a role with the Baltimore Ravens. Notre Dame was lucky to have him as long as they did.
Yeah, I was going to say the only news received worse would be if it was the guy in the seat higher up than Mike Mickens.
Well, because then it would be Mike Mickens too. So
Yeah, Mike Mickens did a 6 years at Notre Dame. A handful of coordinators that he worked for and did a sensational job. A couple of years ago, they gave him the title of well, a couple titles, but coaching the entire secondary, and he did a fantastic job there. He doesn't get credit for Kyle Hamilton, but I'm sure he had an influence on Kyle Hamilton even before he was working with the safety. So, yeah, real blow for Notre Dame, no doubt about it. It's not at you don't have I mean, replacing a coordinator, I guess, is a bigger deal, but the way Mike Mickens is viewed and the job that he's done, it's a serious blow. But like you said, Tim, we knew it was going to happen. Yeah, I mean, it's almost surprising it didn't happen sooner than it did yesterday.
Yeah, and through the years, multiple people in the Goog have told me, multiple people in the program have told me he's the single best evaluator that they've ever seen or worked with. These are people that have been at other high-level programs, some in the past with some NFL experience, and they were very quick to praise Mike Mickens. We see the results on the field, but they talk about how elite he always has been in evaluating talent and then developing that talent. And obviously, he has an exemplary track record from his 6 seasons at Notre Dame to bear that out. We noted last week on the podcast, I guess it was Thursday, we said then be mindful of to the question, and O'Malley always takes the over, but we
always.
specifically said be mindful of the NFL. We mentioned Mike Mickens, we mentioned Marty Biaggi. I think Marty Biaggi has received some interest from the NFL as well. We'll continue to monitor that situation. There's not been any sort of job offer yet, but I know he's been discussed in some NFL circles. Particularly with potentially the Baltimore Ravens. So that's a situation to continue to monitor. But Mike Mickens, as elite a coach as anyone on Notre Dame's staff and with very few peers anywhere at any position in college football.
Yeah, if I were gonna take maybe just like a kind of positive outlook in terms of him staying as long as he did, is he stayed so long that a position group that I feel like was viewed as not a place you'd go to be for Notre Dame, like at cornerback, especially like I mean you had Shane Walton in the early 2000s, an All-American, then you had Julian Love. Neither were like super high draft picks, and he's stayed long enough to really transform that room into a place that now they are getting five-star or borderline five-star safeties and corners, and they can potentially get a guy who it's going to be a really appealing place to come now. And I'm not sure that would have been the case before. So I'll be interested who they get to. But he stayed, for I think 6 seasons. So he really changed that into a position of, I mean, they probably have the best secondary in the country next year. So that's going to be an appealing job for somebody.
Their good secondaries used to not randomly. Their good secondaries used to pop up. 2002, all of a sudden the secondary was making a ton of plays. 2003, it was terrible. You know, Lou Holtz had a good secondary for about 5 years, and then they couldn't get a good secondary for Holtz's last 3 years and Bob Davies' years. And then somehow, some way, I'm not sure what he became better at, Mike Mickens, recruiting or developing, because he developed Xavier Watts at Notre Dame from backup scout team wide receiver Rover into two-time All-American National Defensive Player of the Year. But he also found Leonard Moore, Benjamin Morrison, Tate Johnson, Adon Schuler, and made them play like Todd Light, Pat Terrell, Harrison Smith. I mean, he turned those guys into five-star recruits, and he did a great job. And I think we have to ask the question a couple people asked. The follow-up from ND Dissonance was the first one. Actually, first, let's go to this one. Would he still be Would he still be at Notre Dame if he was a defensive coordinator, JB?
Yes, he would. He would absolutely. I
I
mean,
agree. I agree.
this is career growth for him to go to the Ravens with like a secondary coach, passing and defensive pass game coordinator type of title. that's career growth. It would not be career growth to take that move as Notre Dame's defensive coordinator, because then you're one step away, really a very short step, the way that Mike Mickens has produced, from getting a head coaching job.
I've always pushed back on that a little bit. I mean, Marcus Freeman obviously didn't think that he was ready or the man for the coordinator's job, and I've always said, you know, if he was a coordinator, he wouldn't be able to put his imprint on the defensive secondary the way he can as the position coach. But um, you know, it's would he still be here? Yeah, I agree. I agree that he probably would still be here, but I'm not sure that Notre Dame would be coming off the season that they did defensively. You know, with Chris Ash, obviously the slow start, but after that they were sensational. And I realized that the schedule got easier after the slow start. But I just look. I'm not saying that he couldn't be a good defensive coordinator. What the point I'm trying to make is coordinator and calling plays is very, very different than what his role was at Notre Dame. The role that he played in Notre Dame, he was absolutely sensational. But even Marcus Freeman must have had doubts about him in a bigger role as defensive coordinator. I think that's just stating the obvious and stating facts.
Drew, I want to interject real fast. I mean, Priest, you're right on one hand. Obviously, he had reservations or he would have hired him. But I said to Jack Freeman, and Jack, you can just go ahead and nod if you still agree, because I think you do. It was maybe December 1st podcast before we were kind of waiting. And I said, you know, whatever the reason you want to name that Mike Mickens wasn't named defensive coordinator, you should just name him defensive coordinator at this point to keep him around. That I feel very strongly about that.
Well,
I don't
I
care
felt
if
like
they beat
after Chris
Syracuse. I mean,
Ash, I felt like after Chris Ash, it was time to do it. You thought it was a little bit earlier, and obviously it needed to be a little bit
yeah.
earlier.
But yeah, last year he wasn't. I mean, they bypassed him. I think you just keep throwing guys out there like Tay Johnson, and all these guys
Mhm.
just keep getting better. And I don't. It's tough to lose someone like that. But they were always going to lose a position coach, even the exceptionally highly compensated position coach, to the NFL. It's not like he went to Ohio State to become their defensive coordinator and everybody explodes all over the place. The NFL, people don't want to hear it. The NFL calls a lot. Most coaches listen. It is the premier place to go to test your ability as a coach. The NFL calls. Most people will listen. I want to follow up, Priester, with you on this one because it's a tough one. Is he on the Mount Rushmore of all-time position coaches? If you
Wow.
don't include a single coordinator, so like Al Golden does not count, no matter how good of a linebacker coach he was, I think he is. Barry Alvarez does not count. Like those guys coordinated, they don't count. I think if you go just position coach, he is
Oh,
on
oh,
Mount
okay. Oh,
Rushmore.
okay. I was going to
Yeah,
say, why doesn't he count? Okay.
coordinators do not count.
Okay, that's fair. He would be with me, and I've been,
Yeah,
I've covered a lot more,
that's what I'm saying.
more
Yeah.
seasons than most. Yeah, he would be for me. There's not, I mean, getting back to what Drew said about, and you, T.O. too. I mean, it was just it was an average group of defensive backs until Mike Mickens got his hands on them and turned that around. Yeah, I would put him. I would put him on the Mount Rushmore. How many on Mount Rushmore? Four.
Or, yeah.
Mhm.
I'll start with him and throw it to you guys.
I don't have the knowledge that you guys have on this, but I threw out Harry Houston and Joe Moore would be two. I assume people would
Joe
probably have
Moore's
up
on
there.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
good call.
Yeah.
Um, go ahead, JB.
No, I was going to say I'll defer. I had Joe Moore and Mike Mickens on there. You certainly can make a case for Harry Heastand. I think in a lot of ways you can make a solid case for Tommy Rees and some of that for the work that he did as a first-time offensive coordinator and guiding Notre Dame, helping guide Notre Dame into the college football playoff in his first year, and then what we've seen Tommy Rees do with his career after that. But again, I have a very limited scope when it comes to the all-time Notre Dame assistant coaches to remotely feel like I'm qualified to answer that.
I can't go to Reese for that. What about Tim? Earl Mosley came on the heel. He came in like 92, so you can't really give him an amazing. I almost cursed. You can't give him an amazing ton of credit for like when Bettis and Brooks are seniors. All of a sudden, hey, here we go. That's how you develop the Jerome Bettis. Reggie Brooks got great under him, and that was after a lot of the good running backs. But You figure, I mean, you got to go back to it. You got to find more from the Holtz era probably in this situation
Yeah, I
because
would.
Alvarez is a guy you think of along with Joe Moore.
I
Yeah.
want to hear Drew's comments on this too, but I would give the credit to those running backs to Lou Holtz and the amount of the talent that he was pulling in because he was turning DBs, he was turning running backs into DBs, and they had such an abundance of running backs that they had to utilize their talent there. And you mentioned Lou Holtz, and before we finish this segment, I would like to say a couple words about him because I know people have been asking, but Tim, Earl Mosley was a good coach. There's no doubt, but I couldn't put him there. Is there a cutoff on how far back we go on this? Because I would pick Joe Yanto
I was
and
figuring you're going to use Yanto to fill it out.
Yanto
Yeah.
to his development of great defensive linemen was really off the chart. Before the whole Mount Rushmore and sports thing came up, I think Joe Yanto was there for that this group. I'd throw in Joe Moore. Um, Urban Meyer coach. I
Yeah,
saw Urban
I wanted
Meyer
to make
coach.
sure we're like pointing
Yeah,
out that
now
Urban's tenure wasn't successful enough, but Urban Meyer
right.
is the lead man on the
Yeah.
Mount Rushmore
All
of
right. So if I
ex-coaches.
can't, if I can't pick, and I'll shut up after that. If I can't pick Urban Meyer as my fourth, then I would say Harry Heastan.
Yeah, my other question was asked how good of a position coach Urban Meyer actually was, because
Yeah.
he's the other name I wrote down. I had no idea. And I mean, I've done some historical research in Notre Dame. I think if you get too far back, then it was so head coach dominated and things like that. And the game was so much different. So I think going back to the Lou Holtz era, maybe a little bit before, is probably where you would stop with evaluating position coaches.
Honestly, Tim, you wouldn't know other than like you and Lou and Bill Belinsky if Notre Dame had a great linebackers coach back in 1987 and he left. You'd know if the coordinator left was a problem, but if you're like, oh, they lost their linebackers, going, oh shoot, the whole world would not be lamenting the end of that.
From 88 to 93, it all just gets thrown into the Lou
Yeah.
Holtz bag of tremendousness.
Want to circle back to something we did not touch on enough in the previous Thursday podcast, JB. You had some scheduling notes regarding how the BYU series date changed and came about.
Yeah, so I talked with some people at Big 12 headquarters and talked with some other people involved at the AF. And that was prior to going to the AFCA convention and getting some more information there. The Big 12 is very invested and very motivated to continue to have its team schedule these home and away games, the likes of which BYU is doing with Notre Dame. They want to push forward with that as much as possible, particularly with SEC/Big Ten/Notre Dame programs. And so that's something to be mindful of. What they also want, and they really market around this and are driving towards this, they want November to be try to be their highlight conference, intra-conference matchups. They market it as the race for the championship. They like to tout how many teams they have in the running for their conference championships. So that's why they want to do that. And then Stanford, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think I was talking about it with Tom Zwiller. When Stanford announced that it was playing a money game on October 17th, you knew then that Notre Dame was no longer hosting Stanford on the 17th as had originally been scheduled. And that was kind of some of the more behind the scenes stuff of how that game unfolded. And just another couple of quick notes to try and clean up the whole USC week 0 thing. Talked with people from that program at AFCA, talked with Notre Dame people at AFCA, talked with other Big Ten people at AFCA. The push there, as we know, was for a week 0 game, but in learning more details about that, it was also to be played, it was proposed to be played either in Las Vegas at Allegiant Stadium or in Mexico City. And they wanted to have the game be on Netflix and try to get a large, super large payout for each team. I'm talking more than 10 million per team was the goal had that game been played on week 0. So just some interesting stuff to ponder there and something to consider. I know from speaking with people inside the Goog that Notre Dame continues to talk aggressively about not if, but when it will play its next international contest.
Staying inside the Goog, JB, I think people have been asking a lot about, well, not as much now because they handled the portal really well when you just look at the end of it, but the beginning of the handling of the portal, there's a little bit of clarity on some of the guys that were hired and some movement there. Also including our main man, MTA.
Yeah, that is correct. So as we've researched that and tried to assess kind of where the dynamics lay within the Notre Dame personnel department, following the additions of the two staffers from Penn State, as well as Myron Tagovailoa Mosa, and then also Matt Jansen and Anthony Tresh, which Tresh is analytics, but he's still very involved in some of that. So MTA is actually moving to take over Amir Carlisle's old position. This is what I was told. Amir left mid-season in the fall, I think, for an NFL opportunity, if I'm not mistaken. And so MTA is now that role, which I think was like director of high school relations or something along those lines. I don't have the title right in front of me. And then Jordan Blake is taking over Myron's old role, is how it was explained to me. And then I think the initial Penn State staffer being Kenny Sanders is going to be more like director of player personnel, I was told, than necessarily having the assistant GM title. So just a little bit of clerical stuff to clean up there. Notre Dame still has not hired a replacement for analyst Javon Codlin, who left, as we first reported, to go to Texas, North Texas, and be the secondary coach there for the Mean Green. So that position's opening. And then also Dom Spalding, who had been the wide receiver analyst this past year for Notre Dame, has departed for the Michigan State staff. So Notre Dame will have a couple of analyst openings. And I do want to note, and this guy's an all-time fan favorite, so good for him. Michael Milk Vinson was on a special teams fellowship last year. He has been promoted to a full-time special teams analyst position.
Carlisle actually been promoted to director of player development, but I think you're right, JB, that it had to do with the recruitment of young players. He was seen most of the time. Pretty sure we'd see him around. Every time you saw Amir Carlisle walking through the
Yeah.
Lamar practice field, he was with a young player or an Indian
Yeah.
player.
Yeah.
Great news about Vincent. Everybody likes to have Milk still around.
Yeah, he's good times. Quick note before we get into an answer, we JB found an answer to a grad transfer question that we attempted on Thursday, but now we're gonna have an official answer. But very quickly, Drew, um, four Irish players, five Irish players in bowl games this week. East West Shrine Bowl is, I believe, tomorrow, right? It's Tuesday. That's a quick one. It doesn't get the senior week panache of the Senior Bowl, but Emil Wagner, Eli Raridan, who was all over Twitter for some of his downfield exploits in practice, and Devonta Smith in the East West Shrine game. And then Jalen Stroman and Malachi Fields in the Senior Bowl. I feel like the Senior Bowl, Drew, has grown so much over the last 3 to 4 years that watching the practices became must-see TV last year, I recall. There's a lot of Notre Dame guys in there, of course, but it's so much bigger than it used to be.
Definitely, and I think the clips going on social media, and I think that makes more sense because I think that's what the scouts who go to
Yeah.
the Senior Bowl actually care about is what they're doing in the practices and stuff. Not that they wouldn't watch the game, but I think that is a different environment where they can see how they work, they can get up close to them, get a much better idea in those settings. So that's a good point. And I think it's worth noting with Jalen Stroman is he also played in the American Bowl All-Star game on the 22nd, I believe, or the 23rd on Friday, and then got added to the Senior Bowl. And I double checked too because I saw he was on the roster for the American Bowl, and then you can find it on YouTube, and I saw him running around. So he's going to get two chances to get scouted. I even wonder if how he played in that got him to the Senior Bowl because he was kind of a late add to that, just like RJ Oben was last year.
They should just put up film of his senior day performance against Syracuse, and then Jalen Stroman will be all set. Before we go to segment two, JB, want to clarify the grad transfer. So the question was basically, when can grad transfer? Can grad transfers just jump in the portal because they've graduated? It has been very unclear. I don't think Marcus helped either when he was talking about the portal. He's like, well, except for grad transfers, and everybody got excited. But I don't think that's exactly how it works.
No, it's not. It used to be the case that you could, if you were a grad transfer, you could grad out in spring and then declare yourself available, and that was allowed. But if you're a grad transfer who did not enter your name into the transfer portal by the January 16th deadline, you cannot formally enter the transfer portal. Now, as we discussed last week, I made sure to clarify this, and I spoke with a couple of different power conference GMs to get this nailed down, and it followed up on the information I shared from AFCA. But you can grad transfer out in May, and if you're done, then you can grad transfer out and you can post on social media or you can contact schools
Okay.
yourself
Okay.
and say, I'm available. Once you're a grad transfer, you do have the ability to individually contact schools yourself and try to find a home. So I suspect there will be some of that this summer. I know in speaking with personnel people around college football, multiple people, they expect there will also be some of that, but guys cannot formally declare that they're in the transfer portal if they graduate in late April or early May, or even if they're a June grad, they cannot say, I'm in the transfer portal. They can say, I'm available as a graduate, and then you can figure out how many classes or how much eligibility the individual has left and things like that. But it was emphasized to me, if you did not have your name in by midnight on the 16th, your name cannot be added to the transfer portal unless you were from the two teams that played for the title. The other thing I would note again, and this probably seems like common sense, but I wanted to make sure I got it clarified, and I did and shared last week. But once you're in the portal, as long as you were in by the 16th, you don't have to be done by then. You can sign anytime between now and next season if you're in the portal. And there are still thousands of guys, is my understanding, left in the portal.
Thousands. I mean,
Thousands,
that's
literally
just
thousands.
that's unbelievable. Tim, if I could, before we conclude this segment, I know a lot of people were asking about Coach Holtz. There's some indication that he'd entered hospice. I checked with Reggie Brooks. I don't think that he is officially in hospice, or at least as of last night. But he's not doing well. I mean, everybody that's seen him, I had an opportunity to spend some time with him in Fayetteville before the game against Arkansas, and he's always in great spirits, and his mind was as sharp as could be. But physically, the body doesn't work anymore, and there's not a whole lot that he can do about that. So I don't know that he was officially in hospice. A couple people that I talked to said they wouldn't be surprised if that's imminent and headed in that direction. I know that when that guy goes, that's going to be a really, really emotional day for me, because of my 44 years of covering Notre Dame football. He's been the most impactful person on my life during that time, and so prayers for him as always, and hopefully, as all of us age, we hope to do it as gracefully as we possibly can, and I know that's something that Coach Holtz has wanted to do, and prayers for him, an amazing human being, a huge impact on my life and many, many, many others.
We'll be back with segment 2, burning up the boards. We are back with segment 2, burning up the boards. The first question is from the Rick ND. Combining the incoming freshman class and transfer class, what is the most underrated unit? So we are not including anybody in those, that is already there. You're not throwing like Leonard Moore to make the defensive backfield or anything like that. It's the incoming guys.
Drew, go ahead.
I wrote down the wide receiver class just because, I know there's still a lot of unproven guys, but you got Caden Finley, Devin Fitzgerald, NFL legacy guys, 2 more 4-star prospects, Dylan Faison, who you want to bet on as a genetics, and obviously Quincy Porter was the number 4 wide out in the portal this year. Mylan Graham, also obviously a former high prospect. So you had a lot of those guys that like really bring a lot of talent and influx into that room that we'll see how they ultimately perform. But I think in terms of just like average rating, and if you look at the metrics, that's a class that probably doesn't get its due based on what it's bringing in at a position that needs it.
For me, even though they did not add to the offensive line via the transfer portal, I really like what they brought in with their incoming freshman signee class for 26, and think that there's just some incredible foundational pieces for there. And Notre Dame has recruited offensive line so well that it shouldn't really be in the position of needing to take linemen in the portal on that side of the ball. And so you can make an argument Notre Dame could have used a 6th or 7th guy in the portal if he was willing to, but we've gone over the prices of the money that people are getting to go and start other places. So for me, as I saw this question, I really love what Notre Dame is bringing in with its high school offensive line grouping, and there's probably not quite been enough talk about that.
I would agree with Drew as far as wide receivers being first. I really love Finley. I think Finley is a guy that can make an instant impact. Not a lot of people agree with that, so we will find out. But so that would be my one. So I'm going to go to the defensive tackle area, where Tion Gray and Francis Brew, and I don't know that Elijah Golden's going to be an immediate contributor, but I think long term that's a guy that has a lot going for him. And Tiki Ola, I'm very open minded about him. I don't know how much lateral movement he has, but he is in tremendous condition, strong, and really, really strong at the point of attack. So I look at those guys. When I question about the transfer portal recruiting of defensive tackles, I didn't say they wouldn't get any defensive tackles. It was the process that was screwed up in the beginning. But I think I may underestimated Brew a little bit out of the gate because he's just so darn strong that if he's not making a play individually, he's allowing the people around him to make plays. So I like that group too. I'd put wide receivers first with Drew, but I want to mention the defensive tackles because I think that's a group that short term and long term can really help Notre Dame.
Are we just assuming the defensive ends are not underrated for what they brought in, so I can't include them?
No,
That's how I thought about it, but
I mean, they're not really underrated.
Yeah,
so,
I didn't consider the wide receivers because I didn't think they were underrated the way that people are so excited about Milan Graham and Porter. So that's why I went a different direction. Like I think they did great work there. I just don't think they were underrated.
Yeah, I figured Dunham, Keeley, and Iwatade weren't underrated by many Notre Dame fans, so I decided I can't use defensive end. I would go. That's a good call though, Drew, because of the freshman receivers. Yeah, I don't think of Porter and Graham as underrated, but I think people when they got Porter and Graham, you kind of forget.
Yeah, I like Braden Robinson. I really think that he's got a chance to be really good. I don't know how soon, but I really like Braden Robinson, a little guy. They've got a couple little guys. He's my favorite of the little guys among the freshman receivers.
I'm going to go to Priester first on this one because it's directed to him. From Terry Benedict, offensive line question. Who were the last 3 offensive linemen that Priester said would be better at tackle rather than guard? And when I read this a couple times and sent it to you, Tim, he means you often say guys are better at guard.
I know.
Who do you say is this guy's a tackle? He'll be better at tackle. It's tough because that's a harder position.
Well, and I never really look at it that way. We've talked about this before. How many guys are listed? All these stud offensive linemen are listed as offensive tackles coming out of high school. But the other way around isn't something that I ever really consider. So I had to, the guys that came to mind were guys that didn't necessarily develop, or like Josh Lugg got pushed to guard. I never thought I would see Josh Lugg at guard. I think he was a tackle. But I think in a kind of a extreme modern day look at, or at least the way Joe Rudolph looks at, he's more than happy to throw a prototypical tackle like Will Black to guard. The one guy really that probably stands out the most, and we've talked about this on the podcast before too, is Gerby Lambert. I never thought I would say, I really like Gerby Lambert at guard. I think I would like Gerby Lambert at tackle too. But the way he performed, and the best is yet to come from him, or with whatever position it is. The way he performed at offensive guard this year, I think he's just getting started. But I like him at that position too. But it's a great question by Terry Benedict because I never look at it the other way around. I thought Steve Elmer bumped inside, right, Tim?
Yep,
Did he not? He bumped inside. I thought he was always a tackle. This is a flip side. I never thought that Robert Hainsey would play tackle, and he ended up playing there and is more of an interior line guy. I don't know. Jared Patterson I thought would be a tackle, but the need was inside, and he stayed there, and I saw him playing in the playoffs a couple weekends ago at guard. So the one I can remember talking to Alex Bars at the camp in Chicago, and I was just making conversation because I knew his dad from when he played, and I made the comment that I thought he was a guard, and he took offense to that. I was just making an observation, and of course, when he played in the NFL, he played guard.
Brian Kelly called Steve Elmer a 15-year NFL tackle, so you weren't the only one.
That's right.
As a true freshman, there's some praise for you, Drew Mentuck.
Yeah, I mean, Gerby Lambert is the one I wrote down. I mean, I agree he had really developed this year, but I think he's just so big and nimble that I think just in terms of what he could add at right or left tackle could be really unique, and maybe be even better than what he can do at guard, even though he has the size and all those other things. Like I guess in terms of position value too, I would kind of lean towards him a little bit that way. But I think you can't really go wrong with a guy like that.
Yeah, and it's recency bias, but I wholly agree with you, Drew. I think Gerby Lambert looks like a future NFL tackle, and then we know that they've worked Will Black at guard, and we certainly seem to think the athletic Will Black is going to be better at tackle than guard. So those are just a couple that popped to mind to me, even though the question was directed at TP.
Tim, what really opened my eyes about Lambert was seeing him pull a couple times. It's like, yeah, I want that guy as my pulling guard, but I mean, obviously he has a chance to be a really outstanding tackle as well.
The first only two came to mind without researching. Then I did some research, but the first two that came to mind were the most clear tackles in the history of tackles were Ronnie Stanley and Emil Wagner. You couldn't imagine Emil Wagner playing guard. I never saw. I remember when
Absolutely
yeah,
right.
those guys
Yeah,
were tackles all the way. Then I thought
absolutely.
of one back now I could see him playing guard, and he had to do it a little. Christian Lombard, I always thought was a tackle, and he would be better off at tackle. And he was out at tackle, then he got hurt his back when he was playing guard. So I'm
Right.
not sure what really would have been his best position. He was the one I had to do a little bit of research on. But it's an interesting question because, as Mike McGlinchey said, we're all tackles until we get here.
Well, he was always a tackle,
Yeah.
and still is. He was playing there yesterday.
All right, question number 3, Indy Fan '08. Does beating a terrible Boston College team by 4 points at home qualify for what are we doing here territory in men's basketball? Gentlemen, the floor is yours. Let's see. T.O., let's start with you since
I was
tend
there.
to
I'm going to
ask.
bump it to Drew first. No, but losing to Boston College would have been what are we even doing here to category. That conversation was going on in the first half when Notre Dame didn't score for the first 5.5 minutes, fell down 8-0, fell down 23-12, 37-24. And you're like, what the world are we watching? An ex Notre Dame official sent me a text that said, I see her at the game. Here's your story. Shots were made, shots were missed, more were missed. News at 11. I got another one from someone in the media that wrote, remember, you did this to yourself when they found out that I was the one covering the game. So
Wow.
that's how
Oh,
bad it was. I thought the second half was pretty entertaining. The crowd was surprisingly juiced for Notre Dame Boston College on a negative 13-degree night. The crowd was not bad. It was bad basketball at the beginning, so the crowd wasn't cheering, but the crowd was really pretty good in the comeback. And Micah Shrewsbury mentioned it. I was glad he mentioned it because it was important to mention. They did help. You would never think a Boston College crowd, Drew, would be like something that helped a team that's a losing team.
yeah. Yeah, I agree with you, O'Malley. I mean, they really needed this win. They really needed to like come from behind and prove they can get the victory after some of the other losses they've had recently too. So I think, like we're listening to it and following it in the car, and I was like, once I heard they were down 10, 11, I was like, this is over. This team can't come back.
Right.
They don't have it in them after what they're going through. Some of the stuff that's going on with Micah Shrewsbury like, after Cal. Like I was just like, this isn't going to happen, and they did. So I think, yeah, this is something that should inspire some confidence. There's a long way to go, but. I saw that as a positive sign.
Tim, I mean, that was an inspired second half performance. And like
They played hard.
we've all seen, everybody, he's lost a team. And I agree largely in the previous couple weeks, but he didn't lose the team Saturday night. That was an inspired performance. And so many times Carson Tout is at the center of inspiring his teammates. He's going to be a one and done and walk away from here and people will forget about him. But I mean, I just love everything about that kid, his approach and how important it is for him to help make his teammates play better. I was so inspired that I wrote a full court press column the day after, which I
It's like I
did
covered
not
that game.
did not expect to do. But having watched the game, I was like, that's pretty damn impressive because they stunk out of the gate. BC couldn't shoot either. It was two bad basketball teams, but the more inspired team won in the second half, and I wasn't anticipating that. I'm waiting. It's like 5 o'clock in the morning the next day, and I'm like, I've got to write something about this. That was a heck of a performance when you really least expected because like Coach Shrewsbury said, man, it was a cold night in South Bend, Indiana.
I'll leave it with heck of an effort, maybe, instead of heck of a performance, because I'm not sure the performance was all
Okay.
that
Yeah. Oh,
impressive.
yeah. Thank you.
Yes,
No,
yes,
heck
yeah.
of an effort. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Question from ND77. Please provide me some perspective on the Ole Miss slash Clemson slash Dabo Sweeney tampering claim. It sounds like it was blatant tampering. A writer on the Ole Miss 24/7 site opined that staffs that aren't tampering aren't doing their jobs. Is it either or is both accurate?
So, if this was the NFL, then certainly it would be tampering to an extent that there would be penalties involved. You would be talking about a six-figure fine. You would be talking about forfeiting draft picks, all of that. So I guess if the NCAA and college athletics ever adopt a governing structure, perhaps tampering this blatant in the future would involve being able to sign less people the next year and being fined perhaps out of your revenue share distribution. These are just things that have been posited to me. Yeah, it's tampering, and yeah, everybody everywhere is doing it now. Most of the time, they're doing it via verbal agreements, and not what we've seen with Darian Mensah or with the linebacker that just left Clemson to go to Ole Miss, and now making the rounds this morning on social media is the fact that Clemson has decided to leave that linebacker's bio up on their website. And when you click, they've got a heading that says, click here for more on his timeline at Clemson. And when you click that link, it takes you to Dabo Swinney's press conference ranting about the Ole Miss tampering. So, as you gentlemen know, I'm a big believer in petty, that
Yeah, heck
that
yeah.
every hill is a hill to die on.
Petty
And so
lives.
I do respect the petty involved here in Clemson, but to act like Clemson probably hasn't tampered, come on, and to act like there's anybody out there. I truly am not aware of anyone out there that's not tampering. I know in recent years, think I've shared this before, but in recent years at AFCA conventions, coaches, especially ACC coaches who know I live in South Bend, would come to me and complain about Notre Dame seemingly having such immediate success getting ACC quarterbacks to finish up at their respective schools and already be basically on a plane to South Bend, Indiana, and have that done. So, look, until there's guardrails, we'll see foolishness like this and foolishness like Charles Bediako playing basketball for Alabama on Saturday night, which was absolutely asinine.
And they lost. Alabama lost Saturday night.
Oh yeah, I know.
But they didn't drop. They won't drop because it doesn't count.
They actually improved their projected seed in March Madness.
Yeah.
That's how that works.
I think they are. Yeah, they are. I think they're a ninth seed. think they are.
Just put them there. That's good.
Our next question is from Glass Half Irish. Will any defensive backs leave as a result of Mickens' departure? Seems like it can't be that hard these days.
I agree. It can't be that hard, but I don't expect JB up.
No, I don't think so. And again, like you
That's
can
what the
leave
timing
if
is
you
for.
yeah, you can leave if you lose your head coach. You can't leave if you lose your position coach. You're not allowed that option to go into the transfer portal. So legally not allowed that option to go into
Yeah.
the transfer portal by the letter of the law. I don't think so. I would be surprised again the growth that Chris Ash I think experienced working with the secondary over the course of the 25 season, and I think he's got experience and expertise in the back end. I think Notre Dame will go out and make a really good hire. As indicated to me, expect them to at least reach out to Chris O'Leary, who had some serious phone calls this cycle for power conference defensive coordinator jobs because of the work he did this past year as Lance Taylor's defensive coordinator at Western Michigan. He does not make a lot of money there. He could exponentially increase his salary there. There's some other people on Chris Ash's coaching tree to consider, and certainly on Marcus Freeman's coaching tree to consider, but was indicated strongly to me that the feeling inside the building was they would at least make a call to Chris O'Leary. So yeah, I don't think they lose people because of it.
I don't feel like maybe if he was the coordinator, you'd have people clamoring to go. I mean, JB, as you pointed out, that still doesn't make it legal. But I don't know. It's really hard if anyone gives you any advice to choose a school for position coach because their goal in life is to improve their lot in life as coaches, and that doesn't mean a thing.
Yeah, and Tim, I wanted to point out that Irish Illustrated's Eric Thomas talked to the two DB commits in a class of 27. And I'm trying to remember who said what, but one of them said they're disappointed. Obviously, I mean he's Mike Mickens, but they chose Notre Dame for Notre Dame, and so obviously they have a lot more leeway than the guys that just signed their letter of intent. But yeah, or just actually started school at Notre Dame. But
Right.
yeah, I mean that's what I'm sure. There's always one or two along the way that would say, hell with that, I want to leave because I wanted to play for him. But you don't hear that much at Notre Dame, and you're not hearing that from the two guys that are in the 2027 committed class.
I would.
And last thing, sorry, Drew, the last thing I would add is he left for the NFL. He didn't leave for another college program where the guys can say, oh, dang, he went to school X, so now I'm going to wait and follow him to school X. Like he went to the NFL, so following Mickens somewhere isn't an option for these guys.
Yeah, I agree. And while it maybe can't be that hard, I do wonder with some of the stuff that's happening with Mensa, like all the guys on the team have signed deals. Like, do you really want to try and deal with that too and find a new home when it's still there are other reasons you came to Notre Dame and we'll see who they hire. But yeah, I think it's probably still a little more difficult and where would Notre Dame take a stand with stuff like that too?
You're up, JB.
Yes, I am. I thought O'Malley was maybe going to chime in there. That's on me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Theo?
good. No, I don't want to hear from him now. Question number 6. To Utah _ give me 2. What are the best pass rushes you've seen at Notre Dame, and will the 2026 crew come close? TP, I'd like to start with you on this one.
Well, I wanted to start with TO because I was going to say there has to be an Okwara on the field.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the other one. It's the Julian one too.
Yeah, right. Yeah, thanks, JB. I'm throwing that to Tim.
No,
yeah, the 2018 because it was a 4-man pass rush. That was why the defense was so effective. They were phenomenal rushing the passer with Tillery, Khalid Kareem, Julian Okwara, and then Jonathan Bonner wasn't a pass rusher, but those 3 guys got after it. They were 3 of the top 10. I think it was through week. When the Pittsburgh game was midseason. So we're going to say through week 8 or 9, they were 3 of the top 10 pass rushers in the country per Pro Football Focus. When you throw that out there, it's tough to stop. If you would have now, this group is a heck of a lot deeper than the 2019 group was or 2018 group was. Sorry, there was a pretty big drop off there. People always forget, and I'm going to leave it at this. Julian Love was not the only Julian that went down in the first quarter of that loss to Clemson. They would not have beaten Clemson, but Julian Love and Julian Okwara gone for the game after Okwara already had 3 pressures on Trevor Lawrence. That did not help their cause. They could have lost 13-3 instead of 30-3, TP.
And Tillery was an absolute handful with his length. We thought he was going to be an offensive lineman. They need him to be a defensive lineman. Look, he played well enough to be a high draft pick the following spring. And then I love Khalid Kareem. You looked at him, you thought, is he a tackle or is he going to develop into a tackle? He's a strong side defensive end. Man, I mean, the 3 guys that you mentioned, and Bonner was not a pass rusher, but he held the point of attack, and those 3 guys on the field were really, really outstanding. I'd have to go back to some much further in the early 70s with with a couple of outstanding defensive ends, Willie Fry and Ross Browner. But the whole group of that you mentioned, Tim, was really outstanding.
The 92 group was great at the end. That was before the 93 group. People always talk about the 93, but the 92 group led by Devon McDonald started. The reason they could have won the title in a 14 playoff is because that defense.
Oh man,
started
could have used it that year.
I was gonna go like 2018 was also like where my mind jumped just because of like how good that line was. I did look like if you look at it just statistically, I think last year's line is probably pretty underrated in terms of production. Like look going to Pro Football Focus, which again we take that with a grain of salt. Like they had 295 pressures last year in 12 games, whereas in 2018 it was only 262. Again, as you know, O'Malley, they did that in a variety of different ways. They averaged, I think, the 3rd most sacks per game last year that they have in like the last 7 or 8 years too. So I I think last year the way they do things is pretty underrated, and I think that's something that with what they brought in, they could match again this year.
Yeah,
I like, go ahead, JB. I like the 26 crew, the depth of the defensive line rotation and pass rush.
yeah. I was just going to note that in 21, they amassed 41 sacks as a team, led by, of course, Isaiah Foskey's 11, but then the Adamalola brothers combined for 8.5 sacks in addition to that. So that team was pretty solid in getting after the quarterback in 2021 as well.
We have a question from Troy Murphy Goat. Can we talk about how Notre Dame needs the offensive line to finally take over games every year? We are told the offensive line is going to be great, and I feel they've mostly been just good. How do you take that next step and become a truly elite unit, which by position rankings and player profiles, one would think shouldn't be that tough of an ask?
Go ahead, guys. I have a short comment on it.
All right. They become really good in short yardage situation for me. I mean, and whether it's 4 minutes going into halftime or 4 minutes closing out the game, you come to expect, not hope, that Notre Dame can get it done by imposing its will. So you keep Jagasaw healthy for a change, and you get to see what I expect to be considerable growth and the beginning of dominance from Gerby Lambert, and then you continue to factor in the other players who are respectively very effective at their positions.
Yeah, I agree with this analysis. Like this is the year where they do need them to step up. I mean, the running backs aren't going to be able to turn negative plays and into touchdowns, as Pete Sampson said on the last podcast. Like they're going to have to do a lot to make this run game, even if we like the running backs. Like it's not what it was last year. So I think that's important. And I think the other thing is too, I know we saw against in the national championship game just how good Miami's defensive line is, but that was particularly poor for Notre Dame. I know it was the first game, and Anthony Knapp got a lot better, so I think that's also a good reason to be optimistic for what he could do this year. But they can't have those games where, I mean, CJ Carr is running for his life or he can't do anything because he's going to need some time, and especially earlier in the year when they're kind of, I know they have an easier schedule, but they're still going to be developing and getting some younger receivers involved this year for sure. So.
It's staying healthy is the most important thing to have a cohesive offensive line that you can trust throughout the entire year. And Notre Dame probably won't start with their starting center again this season. So they will have a different starting line. They won't have the same starting lineup going through. It's been rough the last 2 years. The injuries have hurt the line. But honestly, I think great front sevens beat great offensive lines these days. I think it's really hard to block great front sevens with NFL talent on there. They're faster and stronger. And if you want to stop a running game and you're a great front seven, you usually can stop a running game.
Yeah,
Usually.
no, I agree.
Someone's going to say, well, what about this team? There is a team out there, I'm sure, that is able to line up and run.
Yeah, and I thought the progress that Miami made on the interior, which they were doubting going into the season, and as was I, they bridged that gap. If you look at Notre Dame stats, and we understand they had two great running backs, but if you look at their yards per carry and the way they protected CJ Carr, I mean, you would think that was that was a line that could be dominant. They were dominant against USC. Man, that's my favorite performance of the offensive line
They
this
were,
past year.
but they didn't line up to try to stop Notre Dame's running game.
Nope.
They're not a great defensive front seven. They can dominate a lot of teams. If you get a great front seven, it's just hard.
No,
You have to spread them out and make it difficult. It's
no
it's
doubt.
so hard to line.
And to JB's point, you got to be great in short yardage.
Yeah.
And that was why I wanted the Foley kid, the tight end that could play under center in short yardage situations.
Yeah, I love under center and short yardage. Don't start 4 yards back ever again. Our next question from BB Peoria. How about a positional rating for both offense and defense pre-spring? Guys, for the sake of ease, do defensive backfield, linebacker, defensive line. Then it's pretty self-explanatory.
That's you, Drew.
I went defensive back is clearly number one for me. 2 and 3 I kind of struggle with, but I went quarterback, even though there's not really much depth there. Linebacker, offensive line, defensive line, wide receiver, running back, and tight end.
JB?
Yeah, I got DB barely as number one with an asterisk because I think linebacker I would be tempted to have at number one if we knew exactly when KVA was going to return and that he was going to return at full tilt sooner rather than later. So I completely agree. I think it will be the best secondary in college football. I think it will be one of the very best linebacking cores in college football, and I think CJ Carr will play himself into immediate first round NFL draft conversation. So those would be my one, two, three, with DBs one and linebacker and quarterback two and three. Then I would probably go offensive line four, defensive line five, wide receiver six, tight end seven, running back eight, and special teams, whatever.
I think the addition of McKinney and Sanders, I mean, really puts that DB group over the top. I think Drew, you mentioned you struggle between linebacker and defensive line. I think that's a pretty awesome thing, considering how we've thought about the linebackers. And I know KVA's injury probably plays into that, but I do think that this defensive line has a chance to be really good. On the just separate, I separated defense, offense, the offensive side. I think the wide receiver core has a chance to be pretty special, especially with your quarterback who doesn't have a lot of support. Like when we choose positions, you're looking at backup. It's difficult to decide where you slot quarterback because there's really just one with any kind of experience.
Isn't he either first or last?
But he's
great.
But he's damn good. He's damn good with a chance to be great. And I think the offensive line, you'd really like to see them maximize themselves. Drew, I put tight end ahead of running back, just because I think Premier is going to be a premier player when he arrives at Notre Dame.
Defensive back was easy for me, with linebacker easy as number two. I guess it's just correcting myself. I mean, quarterback, I guess they don't have a backup quarterback, so it drops to number three. You can't rate him higher because if he gets hurt, then they could be the last. So I'll leave quarterback at three just for the sake of CJ Carr. I think I'd go defensive line over offensive line. Actually, I kind of agree with that question. I need to see the offensive line do more. I think the offensive line has to be great. If they can stay healthy, I think they have to be better.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. I mean, they need to.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, TP.
No, go ahead, John.
Thought you were done. I apologize. I was just going to say I get that. I get that debate. I think that we have a belief that the offensive line can be truly elite and among the nation's best. I don't know that I feel like Notre Dame can be among the nation's best defensive lines. It can be a much better defensive line.
Yeah, that's fair. I have more of a prove it to me that you're not just good offensive line feel right now. Wide receiver. I mean, I think I'd actually keep running back over tight end because I think Aeneas Williams will be fantastic. But Osborne could be really good too.
I kind of have a bone to pick. I don't want to hear about Joe Moore Award until you start being. I mean, the goal is Joe Moore. Yeah, okay, great. That's the goal of everybody. I get it. You need to play. You need to ramp up your productivity before you start.
I think they were properly rated by the Joe Moore Award last year when they were the semifinalists, which is a bigger group, and they were not a finalist group, and that's what
I agree.
I think that would be.
Yeah. When Aaron Taylor's on the, a big role in that, they're not going to be, I don't know, left out unnecessarily. So I think they're usually right where they should be in that.
Well, he's as much of a driving force as anyone behind that whole process from the very beginning. So, yeah, they're always in the running. They're always in the running. They just got to live up to it a little bit more.
Our next question. Pick the requisite September loss. Remember, you don't need more info because you didn't need any info for losses to Marshall, Stanford, Northern Illinois, Louisville, or both, rather than one to start 2025.
It's a great question. That's why I included it, because he's like, well, we have to see the teams. No, you don't. Look at the teams they lost to early in the season. So I like this question because I can't pick one, but you have to pick one, guys. Everybody's got to pick one.
Well, Stanford and Louisville were both
in October.
Like pretty established into October. So, yeah.
They lost to Ohio State. Does that count?
Yeah.
Well,
it does count. They lost to Ohio State.
I guess
10 players on the field. It counts.
I guess I would pick Wisconsin because although Pat Fitzgerald loves coaching against Notre Dame
in openers.
Yeah. But I don't think he'll have them quite ready. And that will be the venue will be favorable. I would say Wisconsin. But I also will say Notre Dame will not lose in September this year. They will
I don't
not
know.
lose in September this year.
Yeah, I agree with Wisconsin. I mean, there's also the Luke Fickle element. Maybe Marcus Freeman gets in his head or something. I mean, I'm just trying to come up with a reason why that could be a little more challenging. There are going to be some emotions there that could come into play. They're going to have a lot to get ready for it. Maybe Fickle remembers some tendencies for Freeman. I'm not sure, but if I had to pick one of the four, I would go with that one, and that would be my reason.
We don't even know who this question is from, so I can't say
Oh shoot, is that on there?
strictly to placate
This,
person
this
X who
yeah.
asked this question. I will pick Wisconsin. I've had this debate with coaches and personnel people recently, particularly down in Charlotte, because anyone who's paid attention knows that what Wisconsin devolved into last year and dissolved into was ridiculously embarrassing and just an atrocity. And so I'm very much in the camp of I've got to see it before I believe there's any improvement at Wisconsin. But I had somebody else in the Big Ten tell me that he believes very strongly Wisconsin could go 8-4 this year. If Wisconsin's going to go 8-4 this year, I think it has to notch an upset win, like beating Notre Dame on a Sunday in Green Bay, Wisconsin. But it's not going to
But by the way, JB, I'll be putting together a story on transfer portal guys for each of Notre Dame's opponents, and Wisconsin has the most with 33. So that should next is Purdue with 29, followed by Michigan State with 26, and Boston College with 25, and then everybody else's teens are less.
Hopefully, Wisconsin didn't do as well as Miami did, not screwing up their culture for game number one.
They were
coming in
24/7 ranked them 47th overall.
I mean, last year Miami brought in.
Yeah, no, I know.
They were pretty good.
Can you point to Wisconsin's culture and think it needs to be? Could be screwed up after that season. Is that a real point to you?
I will go with
that series is great. TP every year. That's one of the series that I bookmark and look back to over the course of a season because it's so informative.
It's a good thing Rice is not in the MAC. Otherwise, that would be my choice.
Rice is 120, but it doesn't matter. I understand.
It doesn't matter.
Well, it does.
I'll go with Rice.
I mean, in reality, I understand the nature of the question. But in reality, this Notre Dame football program is not going to lose in September of 2026.
Right. Rice runs that funky triple gun offense, triple gun option offense or whatever. So they do run
either, guys. Don't worry. There's no
They
problem.
do run a very unorthodox offense that is somewhat similar to Navy and Drew Cronick, has some same ideations, not exactly the same, but it's a funky offense.
Sunday night game, right? Wisconsin?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
When do they play Rice? 5 days later? Come home late?
Good call. Good
Big
call.
Rice.
It is
Big
a
Rice
short.
backer right now.
It is a short one.
Okay. Our final question is from Calabrese's people, and I've been saving this one. Who is your pick to be defense MVP next year, and why is it Cole Mullins?
Other people are creating this drinking game with Cole Mullins. I'm not bringing him up every episode.
Oh, he's come on at least 6 episodes.
Why not? No, well, if you're talking about defensic tackles, yeah, he's in the running for a spot, but I'll take a shot when
Bryce is drinking, by the way.
I don't have
Freeman.
I don't have a problem playing the game. I get it, but I'm just saying I didn't bring it up. And by the way, when we were talking about offensive guards and offensive tackles, I did not have Anthony Knapp playing offensive tackle when he came out of high school and came to Notre Dame. He's done a hell of a job.
Defensive MVP. Well, first we have to explain why it's not Cole Mullins. Maybe someone does that first. No, but defensive MVP. Mine's Leonard Moore. This question was just too funny not to include, and I've been saving it for a couple of weeks now. So mine is Leonard Moore. Best news would be if the defensive MVP of Notre Dame's football team at the end of the year is KVA.
Similar with Boubacar Traore too. If he, competes for the sack record or something like that, I agree it should be Leonard Moore unless he's hurt or they just, I guess, if the Echoes name him team MVP and give defensive MVP to somebody else for that reason. But other than that, I mean, he's just too good and too effective. And after what we saw, what they did against USC, they were willing to move him around to make him even more effective if they need to. And I think they'll likely continue that if they need to this year.
I'm going to cheat because the rules on this podcast get made up every single week and then erased and made up again. And so I'm going to go with co-MVPs, Drake Bowen and Adon Schuler.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah. Tio, I think a great point. If KVA is, if he's MVP of the defense, and that means he's a heck of a lot more healthy than
back in early October. And
yeah, no doubt about it. Traore along the defensive line, Bowen at linebacker, because I'm not sure that KVA is going to be up and running. And then Leonard Moore. Leonard Moore is a first round draft pick. And I would imagine whether he has one interception or five, it's going to be obvious that he's a first round draft pick.
Could be Thorpe Award winner too. That's, this is probably the only year where you looked at Leonard Moore not winning the Thorpe Award and you thought, all right, Caleb Downs, that's fine. But I think Leonard Moore can be the guy to bring it in next year. And if he does, that's a good sign as well, because they have a lot of good corners.
Just needs a team like Stanford to try and pick on him again for whatever reason to get his stats padded.
He was funny post game. He was like, I was pretty surprised they kept throwing at me. We're all like, yeah, we were all talking about it in the press box.
And and Leonard Moore, I mean, there's no.
No, he was.
Everything's real with Leonard Moore. He's gonna just tell you the way it is, and I'm sure he was surprised.
That is it for this edition of Irish Illustrated Insider, the final one of January. We'll be back next Monday, February 2nd. Is that right, guys? Still time to preview the Super Bowl. A lot more stuff going on as well. And National Signing Day. Doesn't matter anymore, but it's coming up because those things have already happened. But you remember, National Signing Day is next week. What does that even mean these days? I am not sure, but we'll leave the recruiting team to handle that one. Until then, Tim Priester, Irish Illustrated, Drew Mentok, Irish Illustrated, Jack Freeman behind the camera of Irish Illustrated, and John Bryce of Football Scoop. I'm Tim O'Malley. Thank you for watching and listening. Irish Illustrated Insider.